Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to Zambia Blog Talk Radio. It is Saturday, December 11th. Surprisingly, amazingly, we are already going to the middle of the month. Well, today we have a big show for you. This is the topic that is blowing everybody's minds. It doesn't matter whether you are in Africa, you're in Europe, you're in Australia. This is one sensitive subject, and we shall be diving into it, and we just have the right guest for you to talk about this. But before we do that, let me recognize my colleagues who are going to help me to sort of dive into this and talk about this. Let's begin with Canada. Roger, how are you? I like your world map behind the scene there.
The world map is showing you where Omicron is, but the ban is not in effect.
Okay.
And only South Africa. And we'll be discussing the lesson from the travel apartheid. The United Nations chief calls it a travel apartheid. So it will be another interesting discussion in the next coming show.
Exactly. Excellent. So when we finish here, you don't go away. Please join us on what we call open forum. I call it where we throw everything and anything.
Yeah.
We throw grenades and everything else. And also joining us here, my co-host, Mr. Kasuluva Mashona. Kasuluva, how is Zambia today?
Zambia is great, Uncle Nathan, but as usual, it is dry. We don't have rains yet. It is so hot.
Yeah. I thought dry and rain is good, and the dry and what is good, because when it rains, it creates a lot of problems.
Well, I believe some people had planted because it's planting season. So,
okay, I see what you mean.
I have planted. Me here.
Oh, you have planted?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that front, it becomes a bit of a challenge. Yes.
It becomes a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know. Because when there's the seeds are in the ground, they need water consistently, but not too much water. Also, a wonderful gentleman who's been part of this endeavor, this freedom fighter thing.
Yeah, call it freedom fighting.
Freedom fighting for human rights, medical rights, education rights, any word you want to put their rights. Dr. and Honorable McDonald Chava from Oklahoma. How are you, my brother?
I am doing very well this morning. Hey, I had a scare yesterday. Going for the COVID test is not easy, you know, but I went as part of my routine for the kind of job that I do, interacting with people.
Wow.
Yes, we are fine here in Oklahoma. It's a cold morning, but getting up this morning. Yes.
Good to have you. Hi, Fred. Hi, Derek. Please share the link with everybody. We're waiting for our guests to join us, and then we shall be getting into this thorny discussion. And that's why we're calling it Demystifying COVID-19 vaccines, because there's a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of mysticism, a lot of everything filling the blanks on top here. And we want to see, it's good. This is a good time as we are waiting for our guests, for everybody listening, to share the link on your Facebook page, your friends, all the WhatsApp groups that you belong, and all those places, so that people can join us, and so that we also get your comments, your questions, whatever other hanging issues that you have about the COVID vaccine. Are you vaccinated? Why are you not vaccinated? If you're not vaccinated, we're going to dive into all those things and all those things. Yesterday, I think, okay, excellent. Professor Chilengi,
Good afternoon.
I like your background.
Well, thank you. I was trying to set up with an appropriate background outside my house. So, yeah,
Okay, that's very good. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
We're doing good, doing good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let us go into this because we have a lot to talk about. Our guest today, like we have been mentioning, promoting, and talking about on social media and everywhere else, is Professor Roma Chilengi. He is a professor of vaccinology, and just before he was appointed COVID-19 advisor to the President of the Republic of Zambia, he was a chief scientific officer at Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia. And Professor Chilengi is a medical doctor, epidemiologist, and professor of vaccinology, like I have already mentioned. I hope I said all those things right, Dr. Chilengi. Welcome to the show, and we do appreciate you.
Thank you. You are doing pretty well. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and it's good
Excellent,
to be on this show. And good afternoon to the listeners.
excellent. The title of our subject, everybody listening, is Demystifying COVID Vaccines. Before you came in, Professor Chilengi, I was telling the audience that a lot of conspiracy theories about this, a lot of reasons why people have taken certain positions. And you can see the two gentlemen here, Dr. Chava and Makasuluba, will be co-hosting with me. They'll be asking questions as we go. Let's begin like this. What is vaccinology? What does a vaccinologist You are laughing. We need people to understand what this is. Okay. What is
Well, thank you
vaccinology,
very much. I,
Professor? Yes.
I think medical science, like most sciences, is
Mm.
full of ologies.
Yes.
So when you find a strange looking ology, you just need to understand the word, the prefix before it. So
Yes.
vaccinology is basically a study of vaccines.
Okay.
In a very broad sense, it is just a study of vaccines. One who specializes in the work around vaccines is called the vaccinologist. Now, in context of the technical side of vaccinology,
Mm.
it broadly can be divided into two fields.
Okay.
There is a basic science vaccinologist. You can also have a more clinical vaccinologist. I'm much more on the clinical vaccinology,
Okay.
and in real language, that means my focus has been on the clinical or the human applications of vaccine science. And what I have done for the better part of the past 20 years is evaluation of different vaccines in humans, i.e., there's a molecule that is perceived to work as a vaccine. There is what we call the preclinical work that goes into testing that to know that the chemistry is right, the physiology is right.
Mm-hmm.
You have a hypothesis around the mechanism of action. But then once you meet the profile for human use, that is, you finished your experiments in the lab, your experiments in the animals, you want to test in humans, that's where some of us, our work begins. Because
Okay.
then we take it through what we call phase one studies to evaluate how safe is it in humans. You take to phase two studies to look at what we call immunogenicity. Because in phase one, we'll just test, is it safe at all? And when we establish that it is safe, then we want to answer the question, is it doing producing the desired effect? The technical term is immunogenicity. Is it
Mm.
immunogenic? Is it producing the appropriate immune responses? So talking about ologies, the other colleagues who are immunologists
Okay.
So they then focus only on the immune system. All right. And then we take it to the phase 3 studies. This is where we look at, is it having the desired effect? In other words, is it protecting against the disease of interest? And once we establish that, then the product gets into the market. And then you have the product now being used in the public. But beyond that, we do have what we call phase 4 studies.
Okay.
These are now post-marketing studies or pharmacovigilance studies, where you want to look at the real life effects. Is it behaving the way it was behaving when you were evaluating it in the clinical trial space? So basically, the span of a clinical immunologist work is around these kind of things. I hope I have answered that question.
You have. I'm sure Dr. Shalvan Lukasulva will agree that in this explanation you've given, it actually touches on where we are going with this discussion. Prior to your appointment as COVID advisor to the president, you were a scientist at Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia. What goes on at the Center for Disease and Research? And I also want you to dive into about the vaccines that we have been using in Zambia for the past 50 years. I'll combine those two questions.
Right. So, Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia. By the way, I'm still a scientist. I'm still maintaining my work with Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia. We call it in short CIDAS.
Okay.
Now, CIDAS is a private research institution that is mandated by
Okay. I'm sure it will come back. We've been doing well so far. Don't do this to us, Zambian Wi-Fi.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, we can. Please continue.
I think I lost you for a bit.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So CIDAS is a private organization that undertakes research and training activities on diseases of public health importance in Zambia, and provides a lot of technical support to the Ministry of Health in coming up with programs that are of relevance to public health in Zambia. A lot of the work CIDAS does really is in support of the Ministry of Health in making sure that the public health space is the needs of that space are addressed with evidence. Much of it is generating evidence, i.e., how are these programs that the ministry is embarking, how effective are they? What needs to be adjusted in order to better serve the needs of the population? For example, I think the largest footprint of CIDAS has been the introduction of antiretroviral drugs. When HIV infection was, one of those mystical diseases, CIDAS was really among the first institutions in Zambia to do research on HIV, and it was a champion of antiretroviral treatment. And when I came to CIDAS myself in 2011, my work was focused on diarrheal diseases, and my work really focused on introduction of rotavirus vaccination in Zambia, one vaccine that is now given to practically all the children born in this country. So we at CIDAS, we basically try to figure out what is good for the Zambian population and find ways of integrating that into the health system. I think in a nutshell, that's what I can say. So over the last 50 years, to get to your question, the use of vaccine in much of Africa and developing world has not been very prominent, except in the last 20 years or so. Now, I think in the period beyond 20 years back, the popular vaccination that was there was the vaccination against smallpox.
Okay.
I don't know whether you were old enough to recall that every person in Zambia who is probably over 40 years of age today, if you look on their shoulder, you will see a nasty scar. You remember those?
Yes, I have it.
Yeah, that was a big injection with like 8 needles that would be punched in. Some of us got that when we were in primary school. Now, that was a vaccination against smallpox.
Okay.
Smallpox is a disease which is extinct now because, in fact, that vaccine was mandatory. There was no question around it. Everybody had to be vaccinated. But beyond that, we've seen vaccines that have remained mostly in newborn children. The first one we call PCG. It's a vaccine against tuberculosis, and
Okay.
this one is given to babies when they are just born, at birth or within the first week of birth. Then, when babies are 2 months old, we give a bunch of 5 vaccines. We call them pentavalent vaccines. It includes vaccines against diphtheria, whooping cough, tetanus, hepatitis B, and pneumonia. We also give oral vaccines to babies for rotavirus, the one I talked about. Rotavirus is a diarrheal disease. And we also give the polio vaccine. Now, polio is another vaccine that has had dramatic impact over the last 50 years or so. And polio used to be a debilitating disease that would cause people to be crippled. And it is almost extinct now, thanks to vaccines. Thanks to vaccines, purely vaccines have globally pushed back polio disease. Later on, we then have vaccines against measles. Measles we give children when they are 9 months, and we give them a booster at 15 months. We are working on introduction of a vaccine against mumps as well. In the West, they give what is called MMR. It's a combination of measles, mumps, and rubella. Here we are just doing measles. We are still contemplating rubella and mumps because those diseases are not as prominent here. We also have used in the last 7-8 years, we introduced HPV, human papilloma virus vaccine.
Okay.
This is a vaccine again which is given just to young girls before their sexual debut. So we target children between 9 and 13 years, and these are given to girls going to school, really. And that's a vaccine that prevents cervical cancer. You probably know that cervical cancer is the commonest cancer here in Zambia, and it is a completely vaccine preventable disease. But when it goes beyond a particular stage, it is lethal, it kills.
Wow.
And so cervical cancer prevention is on its way now with introduction of this vaccine. Probably in another 15, 20 years, it will be a disease that will be pretty much controlled because of vaccination. But I think in a nutshell, this is the sort of battery of vaccines that comes to mind.
Excellent. Any questions, Dr. Chava, Kasuluva, so far before we make any progress here?
I know you quickly want to get to COVID.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay, so I was muted. All right, so thank you so much, Dr. Chilengi. That was a brilliant introduction. It covers all the ground that we want to explore. I think gives us a very good introduction. Just one comment in terms of all of this activity that is going on in the background. And there's a lot of things you've said and mentioned here, benefits in particular. Do you think, in your opinion, that the population appreciates, Zambian population appreciates the role that vaccination and vaccines play in preventing diseases?
That's an interesting question. I think that the Zambian population does appreciate vaccines. And the basis for my conclusion is that if you look at the vaccines I've been talking about, the BCG, the coverage rate is in excess of 96%, meaning practically every child born in Zambia receives BCG. The battery that we give, the battery of 6 vaccines that we give at 2 months, 3 months, and 4 months, the coverage rate ranges between 94% and 85%. You know, in translated, that means 85% of mothers, when they get their baby, they are getting the babies receive this battery of vaccines. So to me, there's no doubt that the Zambian parent appreciates vaccines. I think that the ball game becomes different when you talk about vaccines for older children and adults. I think historically, Zambians have appreciated vaccines as medicines given to newborn babies, and there's no problem there. They ask any questions. The
So
problem comes when the child is outside the infancy period. And I think that's where the Zambians don't appreciate vaccines much. And there's a reason for this. You know, Zambia's child mortality rate used to be among the highest in the world. In the last 10 years, we've reduced the under 5 mortality rate remarkably. We are almost competing with the developed world. So our children who used to die from malaria, malnutrition, and those conditions, they are not dying anymore, thanks to all these vaccines. So there's a lot of improvement in that space. And mothers and Zambians generally will respond to health care provision based on their perception of the risk. So we've not been used to a situation where adults and other people are at risk of dying. Remember, even when COVID disease first came, when we started to say this disease has come, the majority of the Zambians would say, no, it's not a disease for us. The first wave came and they even used to laugh at us. Second wave came, it started to touch a little. By the time third wave hit, every Zambian had someone affected, and every Zambian suddenly believed that, oh, okay, COVID is real. And I think in the midst of that, the vaccine for COVID comes in and we start to roll out. So let me say the Zambians are kind of slow learners, but they do appreciate the value of vaccines. And sorry, I didn't get your name, but I want to say that the one time during the third wave that we had queues of people for vaccination was when at the height of the third wave, because they have seen people are dying from COVID, they then queued up for it's a phenomenon. We see this even with the cholera outbreaks. When there is a cholera outbreak, you inform people, public messaging, they begin to take precautions. The moment people stop dying, they just go back to their ways. This is what we are seeing today. Because the third wave came and went, we are talking about vaccines, social distance. The public kind of needs something in their face before they can have something new. So I think that would be my reflection. I think when they see the effect of the problem, i.e., severe sickness and death, then they appreciate the intervention.
Okay.
And I think it makes sense to an extent, because I mean, why do you want me to get a jab? I'm fine.
It's scary, though. That's a very scary position to take.
Yeah. They look for every excuse up until they see a neighbor dying, a relative sick, then they go and queue up for the vaccine. That's unfortunately, that's the way it is.
All right. Okay, everybody listening, watching, our guest this morning, our topic is Demystifying COVID Vaccines with Professor Roma Chilengi. Please tell a friend to tune in. Now we are diving into the critical issue here. Professor Chilengi, we're going to play a video clip here and from that we shall pick. We shall have a discussion after that. Let's listen to the video.
All right.
Any Zambian body before strenuous verification and validation is done to this vaccine. No injection should be inserted into a body of any Zambian. We must declare that the vaccine is unsafe until it is scientifically proved to be safe. Not by the Americans, like I said, not by the Russians, not by the Europeans, but declared safe by our own scientists and our own doctors. I heard somebody say, where are we going to get scientists and doctors? Well, if you can't verify what is given to you by your own people, then I suggest that you don't get involved in touching things that are made by others, because then you can be poisoned and we can all die like fools, like Martin Luther King Jr. said. If we are ignorant and we don't want to verify what we eat and what we inject in our bodies or ingest in our bodies, then I think that we do not have the sovereignty and we are not a state. We are now called a banana republic. But
all right, that message has gone. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yes, I've seen it. I saw it the first time it came out.
All right. So the question to that effect is, what system or criteria are we using as a nation to verify that the vaccines are within our stipulated medical standards of care and safety?
Thank you very much. I think that the video is unfortunate, to say the least. And I'm a firm myself who is a charismatic believer, who pastor.
Not
I
at
want
this point.
to say, to make it categorically clear, these are not religious matters, neither are they political matters. And so, I mean, I think it's akin to having somebody who's never been in church be given the pulpit.
Okay.
So,
on a critical question, Dr. Chilengi, you are breaking up.
Hello.
Looks like the internet is failing.
Sorry, the network is a bit of a struggle. I live in the farms.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was saying this is not a religious or political decision. It's not the space for leaders or political leaders to argue the science of a product. And that we have all these.
Dr. Chilengi, maybe mute your video. We just remain with the audio.
Since
don't know if you can hear us.
Well, more on the fact is around how we decide whether a vaccine is good enough or not. Can you hear me? Please just wave
yes,
if you can hear me.
Could you, if you don't mind, can you just begin the sentence again? Okay, he's dropped. We've lost it.
Let's ask him to mute the video. I think it's
so yeah. So Pastor Nathan, just to go back on this question, one of the concerns about these intricate matters, like you're going to vaccinate, you're going to offer a vaccine to adults, to grown-ups. One of the challenges that you run up against is appreciation for it. Why do we need this? And what about the myths that come along with it? And I think that the pastor makes Nevas Mumba makes a good point, though maybe not in good time. Appreciating what this is all about, knowing the benefit ahead of getting it, so that people can actually know.
Hello?
Okay,
Yeah.
there,
So
there
there he
he comes.
comes.
Okay, Professor Chilengi, if we have
Hello?
problems, you can
Sorry,
remove your
I've had
video and just do
I've had
voice.
to
Yeah.
switch my
Remove video.
network, just hoping this will be better.
Okay. So you can begin from the start
Let
of
me try
responding to
to
that. Yeah.
All right. I hope this network will be better. I was saying that the decision around vaccines is neither a political decision nor is it religious. I think we need to be very clear about that. There are enough scientists in Zambia with the experience to make comments and determination on the safety and usefulness of medical products that we country. I sit on the technical working group myself that advises Zambia, the Zambian regulatory process on which vaccines, which products can be recommended. Remember in my introduction, I was talking about my product having brought in the rotavirus vaccine, which is given countrywide today. So I sit on the technical working group that makes these determinations. And the process is pretty standard. Look, we have checklists around which a product is evaluated to see whether it meets those requirements, and when it does, it is good to go. If it doesn't, then specific and requirements have to be met. Now, these vaccines, and actually all the vaccines we use in this country, including the ones we talked about, they have to meet what is called the WHO pre-qualification.
Yes.
Because of the recognition that most developing countries will not be able to do clinical trials by themselves, the World Health Organization sets a standard, which is a minimum standard that a product must meet. And when a product meets that, and it goes through appropriate, rigorous review, which is akin to what the US FDA uses or the European Union medicines evaluation agencies use. Basically, the standard for evaluating vaccines is global. And so WHO, which is the World Health Organization, that service for the world, evaluating product gives them a pre-qualification. So when a product has been WHO pre-qualified as
Professor, I think let's tell him to remove the video. Professor Chilengi.
When it is WHO pre-qualified, then we know we can begin to.
Kasulova, send him a message to remove the video. Let's just do audio. I think the video, yeah.
Population.
Dr. Chava, when he's addressing a critical question, then we experience this.
It looks like that's when the net goes down. Okay, so I'll just fill up the space. He was so I was saying that Nevers makes a good point, but maybe not in good time. There are people who claim to be very knowledgeable about these things, and they'll tell us the messenger RNA system that this vaccine uses works in a certain way, and they'll describe it. And they'll tell you that because of that, it's going to change your whole body complexity. It's going to change something in your body, and that the Antichrist and religion comes into that. So these
Actually,
experts have, yeah,
okay, it's trying to come back. Actually, that issue you raise is one of the questions that I have for him.
right.
Okay,
So
Dr. Chilengi, continue. If you have a problem, just remove the video part and do audio.
I think let's just do that, Dr. Chilengi.
Okay.
Remove your
Professor,
video. Yeah, remove
I
your
turn
just
off
video.
do
my
the
video.
audio.
Yeah, audio. Yes.
All right. Let me do that. Maybe it was okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please
Yes.
go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So let's save some bandwidth by just
Yes.
using audio. So I was saying that we won't even begin to talk about them if they are not WHO pre-qualified. But then
Okay.
when they are WHO pre-qualified and there's interest in evaluating those, then the technical working group will look at the reports around these vaccines. Basically, the steps are the same. Is there what we call a profile for clinical use, meaning all the information that was done before it was tested in the humans? Do we have results from phase 1 studies, phase 2 studies, phase 3 studies? Let me just explain the problem people have is that they expected COVID vaccines to also take 10 to 15 years in development.
I
And the
was one
problem
of
people
them.
have is how come these vaccines, the disease was only understood 2 years ago and we already have a vaccine? I think maybe that's where the crux of the matter is. And let me try and explain the process. Remember, I talked about profile for in human use, and then phase 1 studies, phase 2 studies, phase 3 studies. Okay. So
yes,
the by far the most complicated studies are phase 3 studies, which is the study that will show that the product protects in humans. Because phase 1 studies, typically we will do just a few participants of anything between 10 and 40 participants to show that it is safe. And then phase 2 and phase 1 studies will typically last a few months, 2-3 months, you are done. Phase 2 studies are immunogenic studies. Again, these take anything between 200-300 people to show that there is an immune response. But then the phase 3 studies are the ones which take thousands of people in order to show that when you give it to a lot of people, it is actually protective, because you need statistically significant numbers to show that you can project that your product is protective to the public. Okay, so for a regular disease, give me an example of a disease. Let's say cholera. We have a cholera vaccine right now. So when you have a cholera vaccine that is ready for testing in the public, before you can show that it protects, you will need, let's say, 20,000 people to be vaccinated, of which you are saying maybe you need to have 2,000 episodes of cholera in order to prove that the vaccine protected people. So there's a way that statisticians compute these sample sizes depending on the effect size you are looking for. And then you recruit participants, you vaccinate them. Others, you give them either a placebo or you give them nothing, but you recruit them and then you follow them over time. And when you've had enough of those episodes, so if you look at a disease like cholera and you are testing a vaccine, you have to look for when you have enough critical episodes to make your statistical inference. Okay. So for many diseases, and I've deliberately picked a difficult disease, because you will probably take 10 years to have 2,000 cases of cholera. Where will you get them? Typically, it will affect 300-400 people, it goes off. And then another outbreak comes, it affects 2,000-3,000 people, it goes off. And then another outbreak, so you are mounting your evidence with time. So what happens with COVID is that the technological development of the vaccine made the outbreak of a pandemic. You remember 2020, how many cases did we have? to license the COVID vaccine in the US, they did trials of 40,000 participants. And within 2-3 months, you had your 40,000 people with COVID. And so a trial which ordinarily would take 5-6 years ended up taking 3 months. So it is as simple as that, colleagues. The technological advancement meets with a disease that is very rapid and that is very highly transmissible. Therefore, you have your participants. You don't need 10 years. You needed 3 months. So it's a simple answer. Okay. So if there is a question to that, a legitimate question would be, what is the long-term effect of these vaccines?
Okay.
And the answer to that is we don't know. And this is why pharmacovigilance studies that follow people, that people are told to, when after vaccination, they should report any symptoms so that you can follow them over time, so that in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, you will know. And by the way, it's not unusual for a product to be withdrawn from the market should those long-term studies reveal that it has a particular effect. All right. But for vaccines, we also know that once you vaccinate people, if in the first 40 to 50 days you didn't see anything, it's very unlikely that 2 years later something will happen that is attributable to that. But that's not dismissing the need for safety studies. Safety studies are always part of any vaccines that is deployed. Even vaccines that we've been using for 20 years today, we still collect safety information on them. So when an unusual event happens to a patient, we have these registries here in Zambia. ZAMRA, the Zambia Medicines Regulatory Authority, does have a platform where doctors submit information about vaccines. And that platform feeds into a global database that looks at data cumulatively. So,
Dr. Chilengi, just let me interject there. Is ZAMRA the equivalence of FDA in the USA?
Precisely.
Okay, there you go, Dr. Munsandi, your question.
The way FDA regulates medicines and drugs in the US, in Zambia, it is ZAMRA. Actually, every country has a regulatory authority. They are the ones who will now, after the technical working groups have reviewed, then they have to submit the dossier, what you hear, the product dossier, to ZAMRA. Then ZAMRA has its technical processes, which when they are satisfied, then they will give a marketing authorization, meaning that product can now be used in the Zambian public. For products which I work with a lot in my clinical research space, these are products under what we call IND. IND is investigational new drug. These are products that are not available to the public, but they are under clinical investigation. Like right now, I have clinical trials going on in this country, evaluating new vaccines for rotavirus, HIV vaccines. They are in evaluation right now. We don't talk about them because they are investigational products. Only when they fulfill this criteria. And I think maybe that's an example I should have given instead of a cholera vaccine. Because we've been doing an efficacy trial for an HIV vaccine, and we've taken 3 years to recruit 2,000 participants in 5 countries: Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and South Africa. Okay, so there is no mystery, colleagues, to this issue. Yeah.
Well explained, Professor Chilengi. The follow-up question is going to be to say, are all vaccines the same? Let's say from India, China, and Russia. How do we know that they were made the same?
I think that's a good question. And to answer it, I will approach it this way. When a product is discovered, that is called intellectual property. So
Okay.
the company that discovers a product, it is their intellectual property, meaning they have the formula of how to make that product. Yeah. So you have, when you talk about Pfizer or Moderna, they have reverse engineered the spike protein of coronavirus and come up with a process that can result into a formulation called a vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine. Yeah. In parallel, Moderna have done similarly, but their formula is slightly different. But they arrive
Okay.
at this. It's like let me find an easier example. Is a Toyota Hilux the same as an Isuzu vehicle? It's not the same, but they do the same function
That's
because
right.
they are developed differently, perform a similar or same function. Okay, can they run at exactly the same speed? No, the speed will be different. Are they equally safe? No, but they will do the same thing. They will take you from point A to point B at a given speed. Okay, so it's the same with products.
Yes.
AstraZeneca vaccine, so your Moderna and your Pfizer are very similar in the way they are developed. These are RNA vaccines that are directly delivered. Okay, your AstraZeneca vaccine and your Johnson and Johnson vaccines are spike protein from coronavirus, but that protein is delivered using a vector, which is a different delivery mechanism. The Chinese vaccine is a wholesale vaccine. It's a completely different platform, but it is essentially delivering an antigen of the coronavirus using a different platform. So these are different vaccines, but the basic science is understood. And when that basic science is applied to the vaccine pathways, they have to meet the minimum standards set by regulatory authorities. And when they meet those minimum standards, then they get pre-qualified. I hope I answer the question. They are not the same, they are different, but they do the same thing.
Okay. Kasuluba, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I have a follow-up question. That clarity is great, Professor Chilengi. Why do we have certain vaccines that are not allowed to be used in certain countries? Because this is also a concern, let's say amongst many Zambians, to say, but why? What could be the reason?
Right. And I think you are referring to the labels on the vaccine, right? You are referring to a label on the vaccine. So when manufacturing process is established, you produce the pure form of your product, okay, and you put it in a vial. Beyond that process, what is in the vial is the chemical content of whatever the product is, right? And that's all the science around what that is gonna do is inside the vial. What is outside the vial is packaging and marketing strategy.
Okay.
Let's just put it this way. The price at which Pfizer sells a dose of its vaccine to Americans is 5-6 times higher than it's delivered to Zambia. So if Americans are going to buy the same product at $30, the developing world people will negotiate. I mean, there are mechanisms through which there's the Global Alliance on Vaccine Initiative, the COVAX mechanism. I'm sure you've heard of these things. All right. So those at a global level negotiate essentially in the interest of countries that can't afford. All right. So they will negotiate a price which the manufacturer is happy to deliver given quantities. And that price will usually be trivial in terms of the recovery of costs by the manufacturer. So if the Americans are buying the Pfizer vaccine, for argument's sake, at $40 a dose. The same vaccine is being bought for Zambians at $3 a dose. Now, if you are the owner of the company, what you don't want is a clever businessman picking up vaccines at $3 a dose and delivering them in the USA at $40 a dose. So what goes on the label is essentially driven by a marketing strategy.
Okay.
So certain vaccines will now be labeled depending on the market for which it's earmarked to be delivered. It has nothing to do with what is inside the vial. It's everything to do with what is outside the vial. And we do have technical laboratories here that is able to assess purity, that is able to assess the active ingredient in a given vial. So, so the question of no, why is it labeled not for use in the US is actually a question based on lack of understanding of global economy.
Okay. Okay.
So you are not going to sell the same product at the same cost, and the only way to protect that economic interest is the way you label it.
Okay. Oh, wow. Interesting.
So I hope I answer your question, sir.
Yes,
Yeah, I believe it does make sense. Let's try to throw in this one. In your explanation, Professor Chilengi, you've referred to these initials NRA. Some concerns raised, and I know you've heard this, or you is that these vaccines, the COVID vaccines, are meant to depopulate the world. One of the long-term effects is that, for example, women will not be able to function reproductively, or to what you've heard the theory of depopulating. Please address what is MR, how do NRA vaccines work? You're laughing. Go ahead, please. NRA vaccines, how do they work? And the theory of depopulating the world.
It's a little by the way, it's the same theory we've heard about HPV vaccines. Remember the one I was talking about for cervical cancer?
Yes.
Why are you giving it to our young girls? You want our young girls to be infertile, then they'll never produce. Then you want to overcome and come and occupy Africa. Come on.
And take over the goal.
I mean, I think that conversation is as cheap as it sounds, and really, it's a shame that people spend so much time to create so much myth on such nonsense. I mean, who on earth in their right minds, and I sit in a position of authority myself, would knowingly pick a product that is going to kill their own people, or that is going to harm their own people? Who will do that? And I mean, listen, we are not like people in the caves, you know, who get told, given anything the way it was 100 years. We've gone to school, the same schools as the people in the West, and many times we've done better than them. We understand that we may be technologically challenged in terms of access to resources, but that doesn't mean we don't understand the science. We understand the science, and we fully understand and are responsible for the decisions that we make. Look, the technology of RNA, it's very basic science that proteins are made by a determination of a sequence of amino acids, and that knowledge is in the nucleic acid of a living organism. So you can actually send that instruction using RNA so that the body can make a particular protein. It is so simple. So the difference between the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine is that that instruction in the RNA is given into the human body, so that the human cell is able to produce a protein that is spike protein-like, so that an immune system can be mounted. While in your Pfizer's and your Johnson and Johnson, you are using a vector which is a protein derived from adenovirus. So you give the instruction into the adenovirus, it produces spike protein for you. So you are
Okay.
injecting something that already has spike protein. Whereas the Moderna Pfizer vaccine is giving the instruction to the human cell so that it produces a protein that is spike protein like. There is no myth around this. It is basic science. And unfortunately, it is science at molecular level, and many of us are challenged to understand that. But I think we need to come to a point where you understand that it is the same health system that is providing you 1,000 other medical products that is bringing you these vaccines. So if they intended to kill you, they would have killed you a long time ago. They didn't have to wait for COVID.
That's a good one.
It is the same system. So
I
if
like
that were
that.
the intention, it wouldn't take so many millions of dollars in developing a new vaccine. It
I
would be
know,
quite,
right?
yeah. So
Okay.
please rest assured that there's no gymnastics here.
Let's
And by
conclude.
the way,
Yeah.
these are not the only vaccines whose science is based on genetic engineering. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have run out of time. This is what I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Chilengi is supposed to be featuring on all these blogs and radio TV stations instead of us talking about Kambwili and Lusambo. I'm sorry to say that. Okay? I'm just so sorry to say that. My final question, we shall continue this discussion. We shall pick up the Professor, has it been scientifically, I hope you can answer this in the shortest possible time you can. Has it been scientifically proven that the use of face masks is going to have respiratory effects on human beings using masks?
Not that I'm aware of. I have seen social media articles around that issue. I think that if you are using appropriate masks, appropriate masks are supposed to be designed with what we call hypoallergenic materials, meaning things that are less likely to cause hypersensitivity or allergic reactions. Okay. So the thinking and the allegation there is that because you are not breathing in air freely, you are sucking air through the mask, you may be ingesting some materials from the fiber of the mask that may have deleterious effects later on. Now, who is that person that has been breathing in a mask for 10 years to tell us that you will develop a cancer of the lung after 10 years? So unfortunately, it's another hoax that the anti-vaxxers are running out of ideas. Remember, they were saying when you take the vaccine, you might become a zombie. Well, we are still here.
I've taken the vaccine, I'm not a zombie.
Yeah, so anyway, I appreciate your questions and I'm happy to be on your show and to answer questions. If I don't know, I will say I don't know. But if I know,
no, we
I'll
shall
try.
Definitely do this again. We need to do this again. But I want us to end on a light moment. Are you able to see the screen? Can you see the screen? Can you see
I
us?
can see the screen and maybe I should...
Okay, I want us to talk about this for a few seconds. That's mom, right?
Yes, that's my mother.
That's your mother. What was she saying there? I'm interested in what
Well, so my mother is a staunch UPND
supporter. Okay.
Yes, and
you said CADA.
Yes, she is a CADA. CADA is a very positive word actually. It's
yes,
just
it is.
She's a staunch UPND supporter. Let me use that. And my father, who passed on last year, was the chairman of UPND in Kalulushi.
Okay.
So basically, it was very sad that President HH became president after my dad had passed. Because my dad, when he was 80 years old, in 2016, he stayed the 2 nights counting votes and making sure that the election that was taken away from UPND was protected, but things didn't work out then. So my mom is very much UPND, and she was so happy to be so close to the president of UPND. That was that moment during my inauguration.
You're swearing here. I needed to do this. I like that picture so much. And once, let me say congratulations on behalf of the ZBTR family on your appointment as COVID advisor to the president. And before I let you go, let me make this statement on behalf of this, where we stand here. We are pro-vaccines. Get vaccinated. Look, you may have your position, your conspiracy theories. Both Roger and I are vaccinated. We'll be getting our boost soon. And we want to encourage the people of Zambia to be vaccinated. Stop listening to things that cannot be proved scientifically. Professor Chilengi, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much. I need to just let you know that last weekend we announced that 3 cases of Omicron had been detected in Zambia.
Okay.
Today we were announcing 8 more cases. So Omicron is here, unfortunately.
So wear your mask, get
We'll
vaccinated,
be watching
please.
that space. Yeah.
Stop listening
Stay
to...
indoors if you can.
Yeah, please stay
Yes.
indoors if you can. Thank you, everybody. Let's log back into Open
Bye-bye.
Forum. Have a wonderful day, sir. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
Professor
day.
Chilengi.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope your questions were answered. We shall continue the conversation.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.